resilience. Resilience is a very fashionable term, right? When I started talking about it like 3 years ago, and I came to a company, people were Googling resilience right before I entered the room. What is he talking about? And this is an example of a term that has become very, very fashionable, and everybody is now on the resilience train, or jumping on the resilience train. Also, what I've noticed studying the environment when I was writing my book was that there's a lot of competing models, or a lot of competing, this is how you become more resilient kind of things, which I found surprising and unnecessary, because actually they are not contradicting each other. So what my goal was to come up with a model that is integrative rather than separative, that puts things together rather than apart. Yeah, and that's the sole idea. What's going on when we're running change, for example, or when something unforeseen happens, when something is coming towards us, when adversity hits us, then we react towards that, right? And our reaction can be on different levels, but mostly there is an emotional reaction. And when we're hit with something that's unforeseen, one thing is for sure, you know, one element will be there for us, and that's the floor, right? Because there might be a situation where we are just going down. And when we talk about resilience, resilience is actually the art of getting back up. Yeah? So it's not the art of not being ever shaken by anything, or being, you know, with Teflon, but it is the art of how do you cope with something that's happening to you. You cannot avoid it. You cannot avoid a change. You cannot avoid a restructuring. You cannot avoid the death of a beloved one. But how do you cope with it once you're in? That's the entire story behind it. Why are some people, or some people actually, why do they seem to go through change or through crisis or through adversity seemingly lightweight, lighthearted, they just shrug it off, no big deal, while others really suffer and go down? Leadership. Is a leader born? Is a leader made? Now, we are at the Center for Creative Leadership, so we would be not in business if we would believe that a leader is born. However, there is probably a truth to it, right? There is an element of both. So I was wondering, to which degree is resilience something that is innate, or to which degree resilience is something that can be trained, and if so, how? And what can we learn there, right? So it's all about how we learn it, how we can apply it for ourselves. So you're fairly young, you're full of power, you got 2 kids at home, you have the dream job. What do you do to relax? You train for an Ironman. Exactly. My feeling about myself at that time, or my self-image, was pretty much like that, right? So it's like, you know, I'm just cool shit, man. I mean, I'm really on top of things. I got it under control. So it was really interesting. It was a very strong feeling, very intense. I was very identified with what I was doing. I had become my role. You know, I was director of something, and I had really become that role. And I had a very interesting moment, like a wake-up moment, and that was one fine day. I was waking up in the morning, and I had lost my hearing, part of my hearing. Yeah, so I couldn't hear. And for the first time in my life, that was a situation where I could not solve a problem with working harder, more, sleeping less. Yeah, that had been my strategy so far. What is the limitation of our resources? Or where is our vulnerability? It's called Taipei 101. And it used to be the highest building in the world in 2009. Okay? Now, what's the problem with Taiwan? I mean, some problems with Taiwan is there's earthquakes. And what you see around, or maybe you don't see it, all these buildings here, these are also skyscrapers, just not so tall. So that thing is half a kilometer high, okay? And this is a region with earthquakes. Now, how does such a structure survive an earthquake? Any idea? It doesn't seem to be very massive, right? Flexibility, balance, yeah? Foundation, yeah, actually, it's even cooler than that. Between floor number 86 and 92, there's a pendulum mounted, 600 ton in weight, and that pendulum is going into a counter frequency when an earthquake hits the building. So an earthquake comes, shakes up the building, but the pendulum will neutralize those shock waves. Okay, so that's pretty cool, isn't it? So the question is, okay, cool. So that seems to work. Actually, that building is still there, although there's a couple of earthquakes every year there. Now, an earthquake in real life is adversity, performance reviews, customer presentations, a board meeting, everything, or a fight at home. All of that can be such an earthquake, right? So how would we transfer this into our real life? So what you can see here, this is a beacon. It's a La Jument. It's in the French Atlantic coast. It's a beacon in the sea. And obviously those were the good old days because there's still a guard, right? These days it's all outsourced or done electronically. So that guard was looking at the helicopter saying, what's going on there? And what he didn't see was that behind him, the mother of all waves was approaching and covered the entire space where he was. If you only focus on being tough, it is a question of time before something is tougher than you. How do we combine these two things? On the one hand side, being tough, and on the other hand side, how can I be flexible? Means self-discipline high, means I set myself a goal and I have a tendency to reach that goal, right? Self-discipline low is the opposite. Awareness low means I have no idea how am I feeling. I have no idea how am I doing. Awareness high means I'm aware of stuff that's going on. I'm aware of my emotional state. I'm aware of my mental state. So the differentiation between hardiness and resilience is here. So hardiness as opposed to resilience. Starting with personality, right? So obviously there is an element of resilience that has to do with our personality. Think about the way we work in our coachings when we debrief people, right? Who of you work with Workplace Big Five? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, well, that's 100% almost. So, okay, take the following example. If there was an airplane crashing through the wall of sound right here over us, there would be a huge boom, and everybody of us would go into a moment of shock. And what do we do when we go through a moment of shock? We close our eyes, right? If I was to measure the length, the duration, how long you close your eyes, I would get a very first rough indication biologically on your resistance to stress, to unforeseen events. This is what we measure on the N scale on Workplace Big Five. Yeah, Big Five, N, clinical world, neuroticism. Managers don't like to be neurotic, so we call it need for stability, but it's the same concept. Yeah, and what it means is, to which degree am I resistant to unforeseen events happening in the outside world? Okay? Now, who knows by heart the labels on the two ends of the scale of the N scale in English?
Resilient and
reactive. Resilient and reactive. And there you go. And there we have a problem, because it says resilient. So that means it's actually very simple. When you want a resilient organization, we just run people through this Workplace Big Five, and we only hire those that are low on the N scale because they are resilient, right? No, problem solved. No more burnouts, done deal. What's running opposite direction to the N scale is empathy. Because if I'm empathetic to my outside environment, I need to be somehow touched by emotions going on in the outside world. So it is very true that this particular person wouldn't feel stress. Doesn't mean that his team or her team wouldn't feel stress. Might very well be that they are stressed out and this person wouldn't even notice it, right? So you get the problem of aloofness rather than burning out. So you just put the problem for one person to 12 people reporting into that person. Biography, that's the next level. So personality, if you think about it, this is how we are born, right? This is how we are raised, first 7 years. Then comes the biography, everything that we learn throughout our lives, everything which we experience throughout our lives. Yeah, how we are making sense, and what kind of stories do we tell about our lives. That's the key thing behind here. And I'll come to that in a moment. attitude. So when you think about it, in this very moment that we are sitting here at exactly 11:30 in Brussels, in this very second, who is sitting in your chair? It's the product of your personality and your biography. I mean, that's all there is, right? Biography, that is the people that you know, the people that you're married to, your fathers, your mothers, your kids, your colleagues. I mean, all of that is biography, and the rest is personality. I mean, really, that's it, right? It's pretty simple, actually. And the question is, why is biography something that is important? And is biography not something that is just happening? We cannot change it. Well, think about it. The way the brain stores information, it does not differentiate between things that have happened and the emotions that we have. And when we work in coaching with a client, and a client that had to go through difficult times, and we may call this a trauma, what do? We change the emotional connotation of that event. We try to add meaning to it. We try to add learning to it. We try to look at it from a different perspective. So we change the biography in the brain, because the brain is wired that it is not differentiating between emotions and cognition. So the stories that we are telling about ourselves play an important role. Is it a story that is a repetition of failures, where I was the victim that somebody had done something towards? Or is it a story where I was the shaper of my environment? Okay? Resources. Now, if the attitude is my natural way of being in the present moment, the only way to influence my attitude is different types of resources. Yeah, and we'll come to that. So what kind of ways do I have in order to influence myself? A particular resource is something that I call mind-body connection. So we are raised in a way to believe that the mind is making the decisions and the body is the means of transportation and something that you put clothes on. Yeah? And neuroscience tells us that this is not the case. Body plays a very important role. The way how we think, the way how we feel influences our body, our immune system. Our body influences our thinking. The color of our thoughts, it's all connected. Authentic relationships. Meaning, to which degree am I entertaining relationships to people who really tell the truth, who know me, who I trust? The higher I get up in the organization, the more I'm surrounded with people that will play the power game. They will say, yes, boss, I like your idea, it's a great idea. Actually, I don't like it, but it's not good for my career, right? So I will just keep silent. So, and so these relationships are very critical in the terms of that they're easy to lose, because our clients, and actually most of ourselves, have a lifestyle where it is very, very easy to let go of relationships because we can't maintain them. Because we're never there. We're always in planes, traveling around, or we come home, we leave home early when everybody still sleeps, and we come back when everybody is already sleeping, right? So same lifestyle as our clients in many ways. And last not least, purpose. So to which degree is what I do adding meaning to the world, to something bigger than myself? So it's a intervention that has been developed to make managers share what happened in their lives and what kind of shaped them, who made them who they are. So the first step is listing what are key life events. What have you been going through? So what are the top 10 events in your life? The next step is to say, okay, for each event on a scale from -10 to +10, at that point, what was your life energy like? What was your level of well-being? How did you feel, in essence? And out comes a visual. Actually, there's an Excel template for that, for those who like technology, which would plot all this nicely for you, and you can change it afterwards. And the good thing is, what it does is it gives a pattern without giving any details. So that gives the possibility for a person to share their life story without sharing their life story. And that is, you share with the peer, and the task for the peer is to listen, difficult enough, and to just observe patterns. You, as an executive coach, are meeting the CEO, okay? So you both wear your best suit because it's an important meeting, it's a chemistry meeting. So what's happening? What's happening behind the scenes? Oh, he has a PhD and he's from CCL. Oh man, this guy looks expensive. Gosh, he looks way smarter than me. Look at that suit and the watch. He has even published books. CEO since 10 years, wow. I'm sure he has his own page on Wikipedia. And even his wife looks like a supermodel. So that's all that stuff that goes on there behind the scenes. But we see some very, strong executives. The one is the executive coach, the other one is the executive manager. They meet. So if I'm not the first, the smartest, the nicest, the prettiest, then I will not be loved, be doomed, be excluded, be forgotten. Or something along those lines. And the US Army, I think, is maybe not the place where you would think first that they would work on the resilience of their people. But in 2013, for the first time, more soldiers were killed by suicide than by hostile fire. This research, what it says is that, so you're normally in your performance, normal performance, and then something happens, a crisis. So a crisis can be, in that case, obviously, hostile combat, can be a meeting with your boss, can be a meeting with clients, can be performance review, fight at home, earthquake, everything. What happens is your performance level drops. Why? Or change in the organization. Think about change, the stuff that we discussed here before. So you don't know what you don't know, you're uncertain, you don't know what's going on, so your performance drops because you're talking to others, you're chatting about it, you're standing in the coffee corners, you're not being productive. And then one of three things happens. Either you stay there for a prolonged period of time, meaning that, well, you're just not getting back. It was too much. You're developing a depression, you're developing a burnout, post-traumatic stress disorder, or something else, and you stay there. Or, eventually, that's the majority, they bounce back at some point in time, back to their old performance level. Or, which is something that in medicine is called post-traumatic growth, you actually grow out by this event because you've kind of learned something and you've come out at the back end stronger than before. Yeah, so resilience is kind of the strategy that kicks in when things are not optimal, which they are most of the time, not optimal. If you think about how you can influence yourself, and you think about a battery that you have, that's your energy level, there's actually only a certain number of things that you can do. And the first one is a resource that I call roots. So roots is anything that you can use to get negative energy or any sort of energy out of your system. Yeah? So to get it into the ground. I don't want to be relaxed at all times. There's times where I need to have energy, right? So I want to ramp up my energy. So this is something that I call wings. Then there's tools. So if you think about, you have a certain amount of battery life. So tools is everything that makes your battery last longer. And then, that's the most important part actually. So I really like what you said. This how do you say Eimer? What's Eimer in English? The bucket with the holes. That's energy thieves. Okay? So think about a situation. You're sitting in a room, person comes to talk to you, person leaves the room and you have lost 80% of your will to live, right? That's an energy thief, okay? And you know who they are instantaneously. Yeah, sometimes you have them in the family, sometimes it's colleagues, whatever. So the question is, how do you manage those? Okay, so when you want to lose weight and you sign up for a gym, great first step. This is like reading a book on resilience. Doesn't help you anything. It also doesn't help you to sitting at the bar in the gym looking at the others. That is also great, but it doesn't help you any, right? So the only thing to do it is to do it yourself. Get on the weights, get on the treadmill and do it. So the thing with resilience is the same thing. So how do you get it into your calendar? How do you make sure it's happening every day, every week, every month, every year? How do I add value to something bigger than me? And how can I connect to that when I go through tough times? I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Nobody said I wished I had spent more time in the office, right? I wished I had the courage to express my feelings. I wished I had stayed in touch with my friends, critical leader relationships. I wish I had let myself be happier. You come into a self-reflection now, how is that connected to my life? You know, if that is not just an abstract thing, so how am I doing this? So what's the difference that you are making? There's different spheres that you influence, obviously. It's yourself. Then there's your inner circle. Inner circle can be your family, your direct family, your friends, people that are very, very close to you. Then there's the outer circle. That could be the company, colleagues, maybe people that are not so close to you, other organizations, and then there's the world. And not everybody needs to have a meaning on every level. So again, these were the 7 spheres, and what we worked our way up, right? So personality, we could link this to Workplace Big 5, self-awareness, biography, the biography interventions, talking about our life stories. Where are we? What are the role that we are playing in our lives? What is the attitude? Where I am in concern mode as opposed to influencing mode or control mode? Where I'm confronted or controlled behind the scenes by a dysfunctional belief that is kind of a huge engine without my control. Resources, how can I actually influence all of that? What can I use in order to manage my battery life? And the mind-body connection, what kind of role is my body playing, and how do I really use this to make an impact? We would obviously integrate body work into those workshops as well, right? But this is something that people associated these days with resilience anyways. So I'm trying to also point out that there's other layers that we need to work on when we talk about resilience. Authentic relationships, and last not least, purpose. So when you think of it on a meta level, this is our heritage. That's the stuff that we just carry with us. This is the here and now. This is how we interact with the here and now. And this is how we do self-management. How do we manage our focus? How do we manage our inner state? And if you want to link this to leadership, communication and leadership is happening outside of this. When we are interacting with others, when we are communicating. If that is our personality, our resilience, then communication and leadership is happening outside of those 7 spheres, in interaction with others. Just another way of thinking of it and making sense of it. This is a sailing metaphor, okay? But I like it because it kind of pulls together all the different things and different elements when we talk about resilience. So this is the seabed, this is the waterline, and this obviously is a sailboat. Okay, so far so good, no harm done. Assuming the keel is our personality. Further assume that our biography is the seabed, okay? Meaning there might be some rocks in our seabed, and maybe at times our personality, our keel, hits these rocks, okay? And then it goes bumpy, we get stuck, we need to do something, we need to take a breath, we need to wait until the water level rises, whatever. Then there's stress, events, crisis, adversity, which makes that your boat is deeper in the water, which reduces the distance to your seabed. So it's more likely that you will bump. Yeah, it's more likely that you run on autopilot and you come into things where you're confronted with your biography. Then you got dysfunctional beliefs. This is a hole in your boat. Your boat is taking on water. Yeah, so it goes like deeper into the water. Yeah. Now, okay, so how do you influence that? Resources. This is like a pump, yeah? So this is a pump, how you get the water out of the boat, so it kind of alleviates and it's better sailing. Purpose. So purpose is the direction, the sail, where you take the energy from, where you take the direction from. And the mast is obviously the body, how you transfer all this energy into the reality, right? I mean, without body, without health, we don't do much. Actually, we don't do anything. And relationships, that's the body that kind of carries us through the waves. So it's a metaphor, and each metaphor has its limits, but it is nice because it also links it to the resilience field. So this was something that I didn't talk about at all. So there's individual resilience, but then there's also the systemic component of it, which is the organizational climate, for example. How is change going on? Is it a positive climate? Is it an abrasive climate? Is it supportive for individual resilience or not? So that plays an important role. And all of that together is the amount of resilience available. And that, for me, also answers the question, is resilience something that I have or not? Well, someday yes, someday not. Yeah, because it's a dynamic thing. It's an adaptation process. Resilience is a creative adaptation process to external events. Or, in more simple terms, it's the art of muddling through. Well, this is the Milky Way. Okay, this is the Oort cloud. In the Oort cloud, there is a solar system of which we are one planet. And in this planet, we are in Europe, Brussels, and the CCL offices. Now, if you take this into consideration, what is really worth worrying about? Yeah? So, using perspective. How do we charge our batteries? And then again, it's not a theoretical exercise. How do we make sure it's in our diary? How do we make sure we actually do it? It's not science at all. It is just self-discipline. A lot of it is just self-discipline. Using technology in our favor, but not as an addiction. Just being, I think we all need to develop some sort of adult way of dealing with it. Not only our kids need to do this, but also ourselves in many cases. And don't forget, 2007 was the first year of the iPhone. It was not 1970 or something, or 1970. It's only a couple of years, yeah? So, our body influences our emotions, if we want it or not. It's there, it's proven. So, let's use this to our advantage. Let's use this to our benefit. And relationships, maintain relationships, increase role complexity. Make sure that you play different roles in different contexts, get energy from these different contexts. And last not least, as we all know and we've experienced in this exercise about purpose, this is a guest play. We'll be here for some time, and then we'll be gone. And that's true for everybody. We don't like to talk about it in our society, but linking it to that dimension makes a whole lot of a difference when thinking about what adversity do I have to cope with as we speak. Yeah? So it is very simple. What makes your life matter, and how can you do more of it? Not that more is better, but how can you do some of it? How can you bring it into life? How can you make sure that your values are lived? And I'm talking to you, but I'm also talking to you and your clients, right? How can your clients do that? How can they bring their values into life? So, and then connecting it to leadership. Leadership is nothing without self-leadership. Yeah. So, and this is the CCL model: leading self, leading others, the functions, and all the rest. So, this is leading self, and how can we actually do this in order to be effective in how we're doing. Resilient behavior in many situations is something that is against the norm. It requires some boldness, it requires some bravery, it requires walking alongside a couple of German Shepherd dogs and not be afraid, because that's maybe the mainstream, but you need to do something else in order to make sure that you work or in your own interest, in your own favor, in terms of your awareness and your resilience.